Let's go ahead and start with our prayer before study. Christ, my Lord, the giver of light and wisdom, who opened the eyes of the blind man and transformed the fishermen into wise heralds and teachers of the gospel through the coming of the Holy Spirit, shine also in my mind the light of the grace of the Holy Spirit. Grant me discernment, understanding, and wisdom and learning. Enable me to complete my assignments and to abound in every good work, for to you I give honor and glory. Amen. Most blessed Lord, send the grace of your Holy Spirit on me to strengthen me, that I may learn well the subject I am about to study, and by it become a better person, for your glory, the comfort of my family, and the benefit of your church and our nation. Amen. All right. We are continuing our look at the buildings on the Acropolis, largely built with money from the Delian League that was supposed to be used for keeping Persia out of Greece's business. Today's building, here's our nice little artist's rendering of what the Acropolis might have looked like back in the day. And this is the building right here, this little building. Just put it right, okay, this building. It's a little temple. And there. And right here, it is a temple to Nike, the goddess of victory, and as it so happens, it's really in pretty good shape. You can't go in it. It's closed up, it's bricked up, but here is what it looks like from down below. Yeah, it's still really, really pretty good. Except that you can't, it's just like there's no interior anymore. If you are walking up from the side, this is what it looks like from the side. Up, and it kind of shows you too how steep that climb is to get up there. It's up there pretty high. And so this, a temple to victory, is appropriate because they had this great victory over the Persians, right? So that makes sense. Yes, it's got these lovely ionic columns with the little curlicue, the volute. Anyway, that is another building built by Delian League funds. It shouldn't have been, perhaps. All right. I had you read, hopefully, I don't know if it was easier. Was this reading easier than the first week? Maybe a little bit. I mean, some long speeches. We had some really long speeches. And in fact, a couple of the most famous speeches, Pericles' funeral oration, and also the argument over the Mytilene, which I want to hit both of those pretty hard. We're going to actually talk a pretty long time about those speeches and zoom in on those. But before we do, let's all turn to page 77 in your reading guide. And this is how to write an encomium. Now, Gabriel has written these for me, but I think for all the rest of you, this will be new. So we're going to go over what this is. An encomium is a praise of someone or something. So that long speech by Pericles, it was supposed to be about the first people who died in the war. It turned out to be, though, praise of something, perhaps something else, something bigger than that, which we'll look at in a minute. The opposite is an invective. An invective is when you say so-and-so or such and such place is dirty, rotten, terrible thing, and these are the reasons why. And these were very popular forms of speeches, usually on a ceremonial occasion, right? You're praising someone. Or, as we saw in the debate over Mytilene, Cleon was saying that the Mytileneans were dirty, rotten scoundrels for rebelling, and so it was doing an invective against them and all the reasons they were bad. It was also something that ancient students who were learning to write and speak well, this was an exercise that they did to practice doing these. So this is what it looks like. Numbers 1 through 6 there on page 77 are the parts of an encomium or an invective, right? And if you're saying something's bad, you just do the opposite of all these. So when it says praise, it would be the opposite of praise, right? Say why they're bad, blame them. So the first thing we start out with is a prologue which introduces the subject. And it just so happens I have an ancient example of an encomium here, and it's an encomium on Thucydides. Okay, so let's read his prologue. This is Aphthonius. He's a rhetoric teacher. And this is one of his examples. It is right to honor those who have made useful discoveries for the good things they have provided, and to refer what they have brought to light back justly to those who disclosed it. So I will praise Thucydides, choosing to honor him with his own eloquence. It is a noble thing to honor all discoverers, but Thucydides above the rest, just as he discovered the finest thing of all. For it is not possible to find anything in existence superior to eloquence, nor to find anyone more skilled in eloquence than Thucydides. That's all his prologue. Basically, he's introducing his subject, and you would have to be not paying any attention at all to know that his subject is Thucydides, and he's praising him because he's eloquent. By the way, what does it mean to be eloquent? Let's make sure we know what that means. Oh, I'm really glad I asked.
Like, I know what it means, I'm just trying to find a good definition.
Okay. Does it seem to be a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing.
Okay, it's a good thing, or he wouldn't be praising him for it. Eloquent means skilled at beautiful speaking. If you are eloquent, you have skill with words, and you know how to make them beautiful. So rhetoric is sort of a training in eloquence. So, and of course, you might say, well, I don't think Thucydides is eloquent. I don't think his words are beautiful at all. First of all, we have to remember that we're not reading him in Greek. We're reading a translation. So that's the prologue. Does your prologue have to be this long? No. Notice that this is another time when, if you are good with words, if you have skill in eloquence, you can just pull out all the stops. If you're good with words and words come easy to you, you just go for it. You just describe it in as flowery a way as you wish. All right. Next paragraph. Birth. Praise the person's nation, homeland, ancestors, parents. Praise anything you can about their origins. Let's see how he does it. Thucydides came from a land which gave him both life and art, for he was born in the very same place as eloquence. Through Athens, the mother of his life, he had kings as ancestors, and his fortunes were enhanced by this ancestry. Possessing both powerful ancestry and citizenship of a democracy, he applied the advantage of each to the other's correction. He allowed equality of speech to correct the injustice of wealth, while avoiding the poverty of a common citizen by virtue of his prosperous descent. All right. Did he really say much about his actual family? He said Athens was his mother. And he said through Athens, he had kings as ancestors. Do we literally know if Thucydides had any ancestors that were actually kings? No, we don't. It's Athens. Athens had great people. So what do we do if we don't know anything about the, what if you're writing an encomium on, George Washington, and you don't know anything about his family? Like, George Washington grew up under the colonies and led the greatest country in the world. And you see, you play up their origins in another way. Because it doesn't appear that Aphthonius knows anything about Thucydides' family. Nonetheless, it didn't stop him from roundly praising where he gets whatever he gets, which is from his country. And he says, what's good about Athens, he's got nobility in his background, but he's got democracy, right? So he lets democratic ideas kind of tamp down his snootiness, but he lets noble ideas draw up his egalitarianism. All right. Number 3, education. Coming of such a stock, he was reared under a constitution and laws manifestly superior to others. Because he was able to live at once by arms and by eloquence, because he was also an army leader. Hey, Preston, we're looking at our next writing assignment, which is a encomium, which is on page 77. I'm reading through it. Or you can watch the beginning of the video, too. He aspired to combine in one person both culture and generalship. He neither divorced eloquence from arms, nor set battles in the place of culture. He made a single practice out of things of which there is no single art, uniting in one what is separate by nature. Okay, so did he really say anything about where he went to school?
No.
No. So what basically is his education? Where did he get his education according to Aphthonius here? Who educated him? Athens. He was reared under a constitution and laws manifestly superior. You don't have to know, right? Like, he was brought up as a good Athenian. And it shows because he combined his eloquence with, he was a man of action, but he was also a man of words. All right. Next, achievements. Achievements can be of 3 different kinds. Achievements of soul, wisdom, courage, character traits, right? Yeah. Achievements of body. Now, we would not consider beauty to be an achievement, but they would. In other words, anything good you can say about them physically. They're strong, they're fast, they're good looking, anything. And achievements of fortune, we also would not call these achievements. They're powerful, wealthy, have friends. Now, might there be someone that you can't have something to say about all 3 of those? Sure. Maybe they're not particularly good looking. Socrates was notably not very good looking. But people say he had a beautiful soul. So if I were writing about Socrates, I probably wouldn't talk about his amazing body, because not much to talk about. So do I point out, although he was kind of ugly, he was really a smart guy. Just don't say anything about it. This is praise. We don't want to say anything negative. Let's see what Aphthonius says about Thucydides. When he reached adulthood, he sought an occasion to display the skills in which he had been well schooled before. Fortune soon provided the war, and he made the deeds of all the Greeks his own art. He became custodian of what the war brought to pass. He did not allow time to conceal what each side did. The capture of Plataea is known. The ravaging of Attica was published. The Athenians' voyage round the Peloponnese was made known. Now Pactus witnessed sea battles, and Thucydides by his writings prevented these things from going unnoticed. The taking of Lesbos is spoken of to this day. There was a battle against the Ambraciots, and time has not stolen away the event. The Spartans' lawless judgment is not unknown. Oh, is not unknown. The Totes. Sphacteria and Pylos, the Athenians' greatest achievement, is not unnoticed. The Corcyraeans' address to the Athenian assembly, the Corinthians' reply to them, the charges laid by the Aeginetans when they came to Sparta, Archidamus' moderation at the assembly, Sthenelaidas' incitement to war, Pericles, too, discounting a Spartan embassy and restraining the Athenians' anger during the plague. These things are preserved for all time in Thucydides' writings. All right, did he say anything about his body?
No.
No. Did he say anything about, really, his power or wealth or friends?
No.
No. Basically, what's the only thing he talked about?
Probably his like wisdom and his writing.
Yeah, his wisdom because he wrote this. This is all we got. This is what we got. And then, because he wanted to take up space, he just said, and we know all about Pericles because of this. We know all about the ravaging of Attica. We know about Mytilene. We know about this. We know about that. All from Thucydides. So what if you don't have a lot of material in what you choose? You can take a little material and make it go a long way. He did. All right, next up, compare with someone else, showing your subject in a favorable light, or if you're blaming them, if you're doing an invective, you show them in an unfavorable light. In other words, we're praising Socrates. We want to make him look really good. Let's compare him against somebody not as good. We might say he's better than Aristotle. We might say he's, I don't know, better than modern philosophers because they just say a bunch of kooky stuff, but Socrates told the truth, okay? We compare him to somebody who makes him look good. If you want your subject to look bad, you compare him to somebody who makes them look bad by comparing them to somebody better, right? If we, it wouldn't be hard to do an invective on Hitler, for instance. Almost anybody you compare Hitler to is going to make Hitler look bad. Maybe not anybody, Nero or something. Maybe that's not a good comparison, but you know, another world leader who's obviously better than Hitler makes Hitler look even worse. Okay, let's find out who Aphthonius decides to compare him to. Oh, will anyone compare Herodotus with him? But the one narrates for pleasure. The other's utterances are all for truth. Herodotus just wants to give us pleasure, he says. Thucydides wants to give us truth. To the degree that amusement is inferior to truthfulness, to that degree does Herodotus fall short of Thucydides' excellence. So Thucydides is better than Herodotus because Herodotus just wants to amuse and entertain us. Is that fair? Don't know. Maybe not. But Thucydides wants to get to the heart of the truth. And then we finish with an epilogue. Just close it down. His is very short. There is much else that we could say about Thucydides, but the abundance of his praises precludes saying everything. You know, I could say more, but you can't say everything, so I'm just going to stop now. The end. Here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to pick a person or a place. I don't care what you pick. Ancient, modern. If you pick a person, it can be a celebrity, it can be a writer, it can be a musician. I don't care. And I want you to either do an encomium like this or an invective, if you want to do the opposite and make them sound as bad as possible and tell me all the bad things they did and how bad they are. Don't do both. It's one or the other. You don't mix them up in the same one. And we're going to spend some time looking at Pericles' encomium, which was supposed to be on the first dead, but we'll find out what his encomium seemed to be really on. And I would like you to include all our things that are on your list, right? Parallelisms, anaphora, erotema, litotes. You should have those all in the back of your reading guide. If you don't have them all written down, write them down so you can just check back there whenever you write for me and check them off the list. That's it. Just follow his example. Don't worry if you don't know about the person's education. Tell me how they came to be who they are. Or if you pick a place, you could just talk about what education is like there or how its citizens are educated. Does that make sense? That's it. That's what I want you to write for me for next week. And we are going to look at our questions, but we are also going to take a close look at some of the talking, because there's a lot of talking. Why do you think? Do you have any idea why there might be so much speech giving and debates and whatnot? This is kind of a hard question. It's not obvious what I'm going for. What was the government of Athens like? What do you know about the government of Athens at this time?
It's a democracy.
It's a democracy. So how do you decide what to do?
You take a vote.
You take a vote, and and how do you try to get people to vote for what you want?
You do speeches. You try to build support.
You talk. You talk. You go to the assembly, and you stand up and you talk, and you try to persuade people. Does it kind of make sense why training in rhetoric in public speaking got to be so important? Because that's the path to power and glory and to leading your country in the way that you think it should go. Do we still, in American government, are there still speeches given?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. People stand up on the floor of the Senate or the House of Representatives, and they talk. Do you know you can talk and talk and talk and not stop? It's called a filibuster, I believe, just to burn up time because you want to postpone a vote. It's not against the rules. You can just talk and talk and talk. But it takes some skill to talk and talk and talk, right? There have been people that just start reading books and stuff, because as long as they keep talking, as long as they have the floor, they can keep talking and delay the vote. But in general, people don't do that. But yeah, it's still a thing. People can get up and say their piece in the legislature. Yes. I don't think so.
Yeah, my cat turned 6 today.
It's like, okay, this is like some random, like, so I did this today, you know.
Yeah, because you can just, if you keep talking, you can talk all night till you just give out, but you have to keep talking.
Bagels are my favorite.
It gets to a point, though, where it might just become more annoying than persuasive. Usually that doesn't happen unless there's a particular reason they want to delay the call for a vote, because you're expecting more people to come in the next day or whatever and vote your way or whatever, and you just need to stall for time. But however, we're not trained like they used to be trained in giving speeches. Even not very long ago, Abraham Lincoln debated Stephen Douglas. So, and we live in the heart of the locations. Like Galesburg was the site of one of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And when you read them, they're really good speeches, and people don't really know how to craft a fine speech. It's not as common anyway. But our presidents, when a president is inaugurated, he gives a speech. Every year in January, the president gives a State of the Union address and gives a speech. So we come from a tradition where giving these speeches is is important. But back then, it was really important. Everybody. You didn't have to be elected to something. Anybody who was a citizen could get up and give a speech and persuade people to go your direction. Okay. So at the end of book 1, they voted for war. War is on the way. And the first question I asked you is, what is the general atmosphere in Greece at the beginning of the war? And I directed you towards paragraph 8. Gabriel.
I would say it said both sides were like pretty confident relatively. The young men were pretty excited for the combat, actually.
Yeah. It says both the Peloponnesus and Athens were full of young men whose inexperience made them eager to take up arms. When you've never been in a battle, it sounds very exciting. Then when you've been there and seen people get killed next to you, not so much, maybe.
Like kind of like World War II, where a lot of young recruits went there and then they came back.
It was just shocking. Yes. How about the rest of Greece? Which side did most of Greece tend to be on? Yeah, Gabriel.
Hellenites.
Say again?
The Hellenites.
Yeah, the Hellenes. Well, the Hellenes are the Greeks.
Hellenes. Oh, my bad.
That's fine.
Spartan victory, sorry.
Yes. No, that's fine, Gabriel.
Weird right now.
Men's feelings inclined much more to the Spartans, especially as they proclaimed themselves the liberators of Hellas. Remember what Athens has been doing? Going around, we would say shaking people down for money. That's what we call it now. It's like, oh, you better fork over some money. You're not getting out of this league. We don't even want to hear anything about you maybe not wanting to be a part of this league, or you're going to pay. And go ahead,
I was
do.
going to say, like, plus the massive defensive walls, they're breaking a bunch of rules, they're bullying a lot of other states.
Yes, they've taken the money and built the temple, all the temples in the Acropolis. Yeah. So when Sparta says, we're going to set all of you free, this sounds good. Now, we're going to look at some episodes in today's reading and decide whether or not Sparta is really the force that's setting people free or not. But that's certainly the climate at the beginning. Okay, so do you remember at the end of last week, what did Pericles tell them their strategy should be? What is Athens' strategy in this war? Don't go out there and fight them. You get really good walls. Yeah, they're going to come and they're going to burn your farms and your houses and stuff outside there. You need to be chill about it because it doesn't matter. As long as we have this city and we control the sea, we have everything we need. Ride it out. They'll get tired of it and this will all be over. This is Pericles' strategy. So, he warned them, but what happened to public attitude towards Pericles when the Peloponnesians invaded their land? Yeah, Emma.
They pretty much rejected him. They were blaming him for the whole of their sufferings.
Yeah. Even though he warned them, he told them this is going to be the deal. But when it was really the deal, it says, when they saw the army at Acharnae, barely 7 miles from Athens, they lost all patience. The territory of Athens was being ravaged before the very eyes of the Athenians, a sight which the young men had never seen before, and the old men only in the Persian Wars. And it was naturally thought a grievous insult, and the determination was universal, especially among the young men, to sally forth and stop it. We're going out there. And Pericles, like, no, that was not the plan. Pericles was the object of general indignation. His previous counsels were totally forgotten. He was abused for not leading out the army which he commanded, and he was made responsible for the whole of public suffering. It's all Pericles' fault. In fact, they even fined him. They made him pay a fine for not leading them well enough, even though he told them, this is what's going to happen. I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. And then it happened, and they said, oh, that Pericles. Poor Pericles. How about if I don't look in the parts that I didn't ask you to read? How about that? Let's skip up. So, after the first season, it says, in the same winter, the Athenians gave a funeral at the public cost to those who had first fallen in this war. And I wanted to read to you. This is Plutarch's Lives. And he wrote a series of biographies on famous Greek and Roman personages. And one of them is about Pericles. And he said this about Pericles. Let me see where I'm going to start. He was able to lead the people along with their own wills and consents by persuading and showing them what was to be done, and sometimes too urging and pressing them forward extremely against their will. He made them, whether they would or no, yield submission to what was for their advantage, in which, to say the truth, he did but like a skillful physician, who in a complicated and chronic disease, as he sees occasion, at one while allows his patient the moderate use of such things as please him, at another gives him pains and drug to work the cure. For there arising and growing up, as was natural, all manner of distempered feelings among a people who had so vast a command and dominion, he alone, as a great master, knowing how to handle and deal fitly with each of them, and in an especial manner making that use of hopes and fears as his two chief rudders, with one to check the career of their confidence and the other to raise them up and cheer them under discouragement. He plainly showed that rhetoric, or the art of speaking, is in Plato's language the government of the souls of men, and that her chief business is to address the affections and the passions. That's what Plutarch says. He says Pericles was like a doctor, and he gives a little bit of freedom when they need some encouragement. He clamps down on them when they need to be held back. He appeals to their hopes and to their fears, whichever one will be most useful. So Pericles has an opportunity. People are kind of ticked off. And you might say, well, who are these people who died if they weren't going out and fighting? There were people caught outside the walls. You know, but they weren't able to get inside the walls in time. And so there had been casualties. And it was their habit in Athens to give a speech like this, to have a prominent person give a funeral oration, a funeral speech for the first fallen in whatever war it was. And they chose Pericles to give it. And he says, basically his first paragraph, I'm on page 111 if you want to look with me, but you don't have to. He says, basically, it's our law that somebody's supposed to get up and give a speech like this, and you picked me to do it, so I'm going to do the best I can. That's paragraph 1. Then he says, in the second paragraph, where he really gets started, I shall begin with our ancestors. It is both just and proper that they should have the honor of the first mention on an occasion like the present. All right, what is the topic of his speech, supposedly?
It's supposed to be about the fallen soldiers.
The dead, the first dead of this war. I shall start with our ancestors. They dwelt in the country without break in the succession from generation to generation and handed it down free to the present time by their valor. And then he goes on to the more remote ancestors. Sentence 4 on page 112. That part of our history which tells of the military achievements which gave us our several possessions, or of the ready valor with which either we or our fathers stemmed the tide of Hellenic or foreign aggression, is a theme too familiar to my hearers for me to dwell upon. Therefore I shall pass it by. But what was the road by which we reached our position? What the form of government under which our greatness grew? What the national habits out of which it sprang? These are questions which I may try to solve before I proceed to my eulogy on these men. What? First, says Pericles, okay, I could talk about all our ancestors and how they gave us this country, but, I'm not going to go there. We all know that. But I think I should dwell a little bit on what is our form of government? What are the achievements that gave us this free nation of Athens? Let's talk about that for a while. All right. Our Constitution does not copy the laws of neighboring states. We are rather a pattern to others than imitators ourselves. Its administration favors the many instead of the few. That is why it is called a democracy. All right? He goes on to talk about their freedom. We're a democracy. We support the many, not just the few, not just the rich, not just the wealthy. Everybody has a say in our country. Like Pericles, when are we going to talk about the dead guys? Not yet. Further, we provide plenty of means for the mind to refresh itself from business. We celebrate games and sacrifices and, okay. If we turn to our military policy, there we also differ from our antagonists. We throw open our city to the world and never by alien acts exclude foreigners from any opportunity of learning or observing. In Sparta they had rules about who could come in and how long they could be there. And it's like, we let anybody come in and observe. Nor are these the only points in which our city is worthy of admiration. We cultivate refinement without extravagance and knowledge without effeminacy. Wealth we employ more for use than for show. Right? Now he's talking about their public buildings and decorations. In short, I say that as a city, we are the school of Hellas. While I doubt if the world can produce a man who, where he has only himself to depend upon, is equal to so many emergencies and graced by so happy a versatility as the Athenian. We are the best people in Greece. We're the best people in the world. We're the school of all the rest of Greece. They come and learn from us what it means to be Greek. Has he talked about the dead people yet?
No.
It's not. He goes on, next paragraph. Indeed, if I have dwelt at some length upon the character of our country, it has been to show that our stake in the struggle is not the same as theirs who have no blessings, such blessings to lose. And also that the eulogy of the men over whom I am now speaking might be by definite proofs established. Oh, we finally talked about them. Why am I talking about all of this? Because, people, you got to know what this city of Athens is that they were protecting. What did they die for? For Athens. What is Athens? So died these men as became Athenians. They died as good Athenians. You, their survivors, must determine to have as unaltering a resolution in the field, though you may pray that it may have a happier outcome. For heroes have the whole earth for their tomb, and in lands far from their own, where the column with its epitaph declares it, there is enshrined in every breast a record unwritten with no monument to preserve it, except that of the heart. This reminds me a little bit of the Gettysburg Address. At the very end of the Gettysburg Address, it is for us. Therefore. Oh, I have to start at the beginning. That from their devotion we may take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. He's not done yet. Comfort, not condolence, is what I have to offer the parents of the dead who may be here. Numberless are the chances to which, as they know, the life of man is subject. But fortunate indeed are they who draw for their lot a death so glorious as that which has caused your mourning. And why was their death glorious? Because Athens is so amazing. Turning to the sons and brothers of the dead, I see an arduous struggle before you. When a man is gone, all are wont to praise him. The living have envy to contend with, while those who are no longer in our path are honored with a goodwill into which rivalry does not enter. You know, they died and they're getting praised. What are you going to do? You brothers and sons, what are you going to do worthy of them? Are you going to go out there and fight? My task is now finished. And now that you have brought to a close your lamentations for your relatives, you may depart. What did Pericles spend almost all of his time talking about?
Like the glory of Athens.
The glory of Athens. The funeral oration of Pericles is an oration about the glory of Athens. Now, why might that have been a good move on Pericles' part? How were people feeling about seeing their farms burned? And they were upset. They were upset. They needed to be reminded, this is what we're fighting for. We're the greatest of the Greeks, and this is what we're fighting for. We need to turn it around. So we had this opportunity and took it. We could spend another hour just reading through the funeral oration of Pericles. We're not going to. It's a master class in how to give a good speech and how to turn opinion around and get people fired up. This was also important because of the next question I asked you. How did Pericles' advice contribute to the plague? What does Pericles want him to do? Where does he want him to stay?
In Athens.
And what's not so good sometimes about stuff like that?
Because you can bring like a plague or something into the city and it just spreads.
It just spreads. Yeah. It's being crammed in a small space with a lot of people isn't good when people start getting sick. Pericles was one of them. He died of that plague. Just a little over 2 years into the war, they lost Pericles. And in the rest of this book, we'll see if they decide to follow Pericles' advice. And I asked you, what effect did it have on morality?
It essentially eliminated it. They just lost all sense of morality.
Yes.
They had zero respect for law, honor, and the gods.
Yeah. He says on page 121, perseverance in what men called honor was popular with none. It was so uncertain whether they would be spared to attain the object, but it was settled that present enjoyment and all that contributed to it was both honorable and useful. Fear of gods or law of man, there was none to restrain them. As for the first, they judged it to be just the same, whether they worshipped them or not. As they saw all alike perishing, People who worshiped the gods died. People who didn't worship them died. What's the point? And for the last law, no one expected to live to be brought to trial for his offenses. But each felt that a far severer sentence had already been passed upon them all and hung over their heads. And before this fell, it was only reasonable to enjoy life a little. Pericles died, and you have all the citizens, residents of Attica, of Athens, crammed inside the walls, all thinking, well, I'm probably going to die tomorrow anyway or next week, so might as well do anything I want. It's not good. It's really not a good situation already. Okay, we already did the last question pretty thoroughly, I feel like. Just a second. I want to see which parts. Okay, 71 through 78, 34 through 65. According to Thucydides, why did Athens ultimately lose the war? Emma?
Spoiler, they did not follow Pericles.
They did not follow Pericles' advice. He outlived its commencement, the war's commencement, 2 years and 6 months. And the correctness of his foresight concerning the war became better known after his death. He told them to wait quietly, to pay attention to their marine, to attempt no new conquests, to expose the city to no hazards during the war, and doing this promised them a favorable result. What they did was the very contrary, allowing private ambitions and private interests in matters apparently quite foreign to the war to lead them into projects unjust, both to themselves and to their allies, projects whose success would only conduce to the honor and advantage of private persons, and whose failure entailed certain disaster on the country in the war. Yeah, they did. What did they do instead? The absolute opposite. The absolute opposite. So, Plataea. We have two basic things going on that I had you read about. Plataea and Mytilene. And I mentioned Plataea last week. What happened near Plataea in a previous generation? What did the men from Plataea do? Does anybody remember? When the Persians lost at Salamis and Xerxes hightailed it home, he left behind a guy named Mardonius, and Mardonius said, oh, just give me 300,000 picked troops and I'll get Greece for you. And the next year, he took up a camp near Plataea. And the Plataeans came out against him and fought, and they fought so well, and because this was almost considered holy ground, because they finally, decisively, that third time, beat the Persians, that Plataea was kind of considered untouchable until it wasn't anymore. And in Book 2, just to make sure that we followed this, it says, the next summer, the Peloponnesians and their allies, instead of invading Attica, marched against Plataea under the command of Archidamus, son of Zeuxidamus, king of the Spartans. He encamped his army and was about to lay waste to the country when the Plataeans hastened to send envoys to him and spoke as follows: Archidamus and Spartans, in invading the Plataean territory, you do what is wrong in itself and worthy neither of yourselves nor of the fathers who begot you. Pausanias, son of Cleombrotus, your countryman, after freeing Hellas from the Medes, with the help of those Hellenes who were willing to undertake the risk of the battle fought near our city, offered sacrifice to Zeus, the liberator, in the Agora of Plataea, and calling all the allies together, restored to the Plataeans their city and territory, and declared it independent and inviolate against aggression or conquest. Should any such be attempted, the allies present were to help according to their power. What the heck? Your king, Pausanias, said we were inviolate. We were independent. Why are you marching against us? What are you doing? The Plataeans had got this far when they were cut short by Archidamus, the king of the Spartans, saying, there is justice, Plataeans, in what you say, if you act up to your words. According to the grant of Pausanias, continue to be independent yourselves, and join in freeing those of your fellow countrymen, who after sharing in the perils of that period, joined in the oaths to you, and are now subject to the Athenians. Plataea, yes, you can continue to be independent. Here's all you got to do. Make sure everybody else is independent too. You need to march with us and free all these poor people who are being downtrodden, subjected to Athens. When they had heard what he had to say, they re-entered the city, and after consulting with the people, said that they wished first to acquaint the Athenians with this proposal, and in the event of their approving, to accede to it. In the meantime, they asked him to grant them a truce, and not to lay waste their territory. He accordingly granted a truce for the number of days requisite for the journey. The Plataean envoys went to Athens and consulted the Athenians. And why would they consult the Athenians? Because they had become allies of Athens. They were allies of Athens. They said, well, we can't just break our truce with Athens, our deal with Athens, and come over to Sparta. And they answered that. They answered the Spartans, we can't leave them. After this appeal to the gods, Archidamus put his army in motion. First, he enclosed the city with a palisade, threw up a mound against the city, and laid siege to Plataea, simply because they wouldn't agree to free the rest of Greece from Athens. And they were instead friendly to Athens. Seems a little sketchy. Okay, that is where we left off in Book 2. And we move on to Book 3. All right, and I asked you a question about Mytilene. First of all, we need to discuss what is the deal with Mytilene. Everybody, if you have your book, could you turn to page 162? And there's a lovely map on page 162. And you will see over on the right side, near what is today Turkey, near Asia Minor, there's a large sort of upside-down U-shaped weird island called Lesbos. And Mytilene is a town on one end of Lesbos. Do you guys see that? Because that's where all this action is happening. And let me find the first page of Book 3 again. It says, immediately after the invasion of the Peloponnesians, all Lesbos, except Methymna, revolted from the Athenians. The Lesbians had wished to revolt even before the war, but the Spartans would not receive them. And yet, now when they did revolt, they were compelled to do so sooner than they had intended. Okay, so Lesbos is a tributary member of the Delian League, but they're tired of being a member of the Delian League. It's one of these situations, and they want to revolt from Athens. And they finally did. But it was triggered by some people in Mytilene, we're told. That the Mytileneans basically force the whole island to revolt. And they send messengers to Sparta and say, we want to go over to you. They give us this as on page 163 as a reason. We did not become allies of the Athenians for the subjugation of the Hellenes, but allies of the Hellenes for their liberation from the Mede. And as long as the Athenians led us fairly, we followed them loyally. But when we saw them relax their hostility to the Mede and try to make the allies their subjects, then our apprehensions began. Hey, we were all in as long as we were still fighting the Persians. But when we stopped fighting the Persians and they started just bossing us around, we're done. We're out. So we want your help. Well, the revolt didn't work out. Athens sent ships and they put down the revolt. And now the question is, what are they going to do about it? What are the Athenians going to do about it? And we have a couple more speeches. And I wanted to look at those speeches. First of all, to set the stage, after they've reconquered the island, they bring some prisoners back. Upon the arrival of the prisoners, the Athenians at once put them to death. But they put the leader of them to death. And after deliberating as to what they should do with the former, with all the rest of the prisoners, in the fury of the moment, determined to put to death not only the prisoners in Athens, but the whole adult population of Mytilene, and make slaves of the women and children. Let's not just put to death these ringleaders that we captured. Let's send ships and kill every single grown man in Mytilene. And we'll round up all the women and children and sell them as slaves. That's their punishment. And they voted on it. Yeah, let's do it. And they sent a ship off to deliver the message. Now, the morrow brought repentance with it and reflection on the horrid cruelty of a decree which condemned a whole city to the fate merited only by the guilty. They got up the next morning and they thought, what did we do? What did we vote for? This was no sooner perceived by the Mytilenean ambassadors at Athens and their Athenian supporters than they moved the authorities to put the question again to the vote. Let's call another assembly and vote again. An assembly was therefore at once called, and after much expression of opinion on both sides, Cleon, the son of Cleonidas, the same who had carried the former motion of putting the Mytileneans to death, and how was he described?
As the most violent man in Athens.
The most violent man in Athens, and at that time by far the most powerful with the people, came forward again and spoke as follows. Sometimes in this book you'll see the phrase "the people" capitalized, and you might think, what is the deal with the people? It means not the leadership, not the nobility, not the oligarchs, but sort of the, if you had two political parties, one would be the few who want to be in charge, and the other one's the people, the common party. And so he said, Cleon, the most violent man in Athens, is powerful with the people in Athens. He's popular. He's popular. So he's going to get up and he's going to argue again. We shouldn't change our minds. We need to kill all those people. They deserve to all die, and all the women and children deserve to be slaves. And he's going to try to persuade them of this. And he says in sentence 3, the most alarming feature in the case is the constant change of measures with which we appear to be threatened. One day we say, kill them all. The next day we get up, it's like, oh, let's not. And our seeming ignorance of the fact that bad laws, which are never changed, are better for a city than good ones that have no authority. Bad laws that you never change are better than good laws that you don't follow through on, you don't carry through. What do you think of that? It's better to have bad laws that you never change than good laws that you don't enforce.
I don't know about that. It's almost kind of sounding like Creon from the one play antagonist a
Oh.
little bit.
Yes. Creon made a decree. Nobody's burying Eteocles. And you know what? I just don't want to look weak. If I waffle and change my mind, that's a very good observation, Gabriel. If I waffle on this, I'll look weak. Anything rather than look weak as the leadership. So yeah, maybe it is a bad law. Too bad. Not changing it. This is Cleon's argument here. First of all, we will look bad if we just keep changing our minds. By the way, what does it say about democracy in action when something like this can happen? So we all voted to kill them all, and then we get up the next day and we feel bad and we say, oh, we shouldn't kill them all. What are democracies like? What happens maybe sometimes in a democracy? One day, those dirty, rotten scoundrels, they're terrible, they are evil, let's kill them all. The next day, oh, yeah, maybe they shouldn't all die.
Like if you're like angry in the moment or something, and then you make a decision, you'll regret it later.
And when you get a big group of people together, and people are shouting and people are angry, do those big groups of people sometimes do things they wouldn't do individually?
Yeah.
They do. They do. And the whole Mytilene controversy in Thucydides is a case study in democracy in action. Now you might say, but we're in democracy, but we're not. We don't have mobs of people that just want to go and make a law. We elect lawmakers. We're a republic. And they review them and they debate them in Congress before they institute a law. We think about it. We don't just get a big group together and say, hey, let's go do whatever. Because when you do, people make really bad decisions. And then they regret it the next day. So well, I don't know why we did that. That wasn't a very nice thing to do. That wasn't a good plan at all. That's why our founding fathers said, yeah, you don't want a democracy. We tend to think of democracy as being a really good thing. And the ancients, they just didn't. They said it gives you a lot of freedom, but they had situations like Mytilene. They had situations where they made some really bad decisions. So when you read Plato, which we're going to read Plato here next, after Thucydides, when we read the Republic, we're going to find out he didn't have a very high opinion of democracy at all for somebody who lived in one. Okay, all right, so let's go back to Cleon. So he says he hasn't changed his mind. He says, I'm going to proceed to show you that no one state has ever injured you as much as Mytilene. I can make allowance for those who revolt because they cannot bear our empire, But for those who possessed an island with fortifications, who could fear our enemies only by sea, had their own force of triremes, who were independent and held the highest honor, to act as these have done, this is not revolt. Revolt implies oppression. It is deliberate and wanton aggression, an attempt to ruin us by siding with our bitterest enemies, a worse offense than a war undertaken on their own account in the acquisition of power. He says, look, I can understand some downtrodden little city who says they're being oppressed by us. That's not Lesbos. That's not Mytilene. They were still giving ships to the League. They weren't paying money. They were manning their own ships. We treated them with respect and honor, and this is how they paid us back. Our mistake has been to distinguish the Mytileneans as we have done. Had they been long ago treated like the rest, they never would have so far forgotten themselves, human nature being as surely made arrogant by consideration as it is awed by firmness. You know, if we'd been tough on them, they wouldn't have got on their high horse and pulled a stunt like this. Our mistake is being too nice to them. This is how they've paid us. I, therefore, now as before, persist against your reversing your first decision or giving way to three failings most fatal to empire: pity, sentiment, and indulgence. For if they were right in rebelling, you must be wrong in ruling. If they shouldn't be punished for rebelling, if they were right to rebel, you're wrong to rule them. However, if right or wrong, you determine to rule, you must carry out your principle and punish the Mytileneans as your interest requires, or else you must give up your empire and cultivate honesty without danger. What happens next, guys, if an island or a city revolts from the empire and you don't punish them very much? What happens next?
You think the other ones are going to start?
The other ones are going to do it too. We need to crack down hard. Kill them all. Kill them all. Oh my gosh. All right. So you would think, oh, I can't wait for the next guy to stand up because he's going to be just a breath of fresh air, because he's going to say something like, oh, those poor Mytileneans, you can't do that. And unfortunately, you're going to be a little bit disappointed if you just want sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops from the other guy. Because here's what the other guy's going to stand up and say. Remember, this is the guy, we shouldn't kill them all. He says, I think two things most opposed to good counsel are haste and passion. Haste usually goes hand in hand with folly, passion with coarseness and narrowness of mind. You don't want to think and then act immediately. You don't want to get all worked up and make decisions based on the moment of anger. You need to stop and think about it. So I'm like, okay, I like this guy. We need to stop and think about it. Should we be killing all the inhabitants of the city? He says, I have not come forward either to oppose or to accuse in the matter of Mytilene. Indeed, the question before us as sensible men is not their guilt, but our interests. Though I prove them ever so guilty, I shall not therefore advise their death unless it be expedient, unless it's in our best interests. Nor though they should have claims to indulgence, shall I recommend it unless it clearly be for the good of the country. When we decide whether or not to kill everybody in another town, what should we look at according to this guy?
We should look if it benefits us.
Is it good for us? Not, is it right? Is it moral? Is it fair? Is it good for us? This disappoints me. Because I want this guy to stand up and say, that's a horrible thing to do. That's an unfair, unjust thing. He's not going to say that. He's saying, yeah, but we need to take a good hard look at whether or not this benefits us. And he says, we are not in a court of justice, but in a political assembly. And the question is not justice, but how to make the Mytileneans useful to Athens. Consider a moment. At present, if a city that has already revolted perceive that it cannot succeed, it will come to terms while it is still able to refund expenses and pay tribute afterwards. In the other case, what city, think you, would not prepare better than is now done and hold out to the last against its besiegers, if it is all one whether it surrender late or soon? How can it be otherwise than hurtful to us to be put to the expense of a siege, because surrender is out of the question? If we take the city, to receive a ruined city, from which we can no longer draw revenue, which forms the real strength against the enemy. If you see everybody killed in Mytilene, yeah, and we're another city. All right, we're all another city now. And we heard, oh, this is what happened when Mytilene revolted. And we decide to revolt. And the revolt is not going well. What are we going to do? We going to surrender?
No.
Oh, no. They're going to kill us anyway. We might as well go down fighting. We'll fight till they kill us all anyway, because they're gonna massacre us. They're gonna execute us all. We might as well keep fighting. Why in the world would we go over to them and say, we're so very sorry, and just turn over the ringleaders? If they're gonna punish us all, hey, let's fight to the bitter end. He says, that's not in our best interests. We want it to look like we'll be lenient. And then maybe if the rebellion isn't going very well, they'll come over to us. And we'll get a city that we can still get something out of, instead of a ruined city that can't give us anything. It might not sound very just, but it's a reasonable position. Only consider what a blunder you would commit in doing as Cleon recommends. Cleon says that we can punish them and benefit ourselves. He says the claims of justice and expediency can both be satisfied. He says facts do not confirm the possibility of such combination. Well, he, fortunately for the Mytileneans, I guess, carried the day. And they revoted and they said, okay, let's not kill everybody. Problem. Yesterday we sent a ship to Mytilene to tell them to kill everybody. So they got another ship ready really, really fast. And they told the guys, book it as fast as you can. Thucydides says they ate at the oars. They wrote 24/7, they took turns, just full speed. The other ship, on the other hand, knew it was carrying orders to kill everybody, so they didn't really hurry, because it wasn't very good news. So they sort of dawdled on the way, and the other ship beat them. The other ship did not beat them, but the other ship got there so close after that they had just handed in the order to execute them when the other ship came in and said, cancel that. It was a very close thing. This is what happens when you just get a bunch of people fired up and they make a decision and then they turn around and they decide that was a bad decision. It's a notorious episode in Thucydides. All right, now let's go back to Plataea. Poor Plataea, who was saying, what? We were awesome and we fought against the Persians and the king of Sparta back at that time, he said we were to be independent forever. Let's go back and take a look at what's happening with Plataea. The siege continued, and there was a very exciting, I think it's kind of exciting, about the guys who snuck out. They snuck out at night. Do you remember that part? They waited till a storm, and most of the guards, most of the Spartan and Theban guards were going to be inside. And they snuck out in the thunderstorm, and they put the ladders against the wall, and they ran out. And then they ran towards Thebes, which was the enemy, and then circled around because they thought, they'll never expect us to go that direction. They'll expect us to run to Athens, which is exactly what happened. The Spartans chased them on the road to Athens, but they weren't on the road to Athens. They were on the road to Thebes, and then they turned around. They got out, but unfortunately it didn't do any good. And eventually, Plataea had to surrender. They were running out of food. They were running out of resources, and they surrendered. And it says, the Plataeans were now in the last state of weakness, and the herald had no sooner delivered his message than they surrendered the city. The Peloponnesians fed them for some days until the judges from Sparta, who were 5 in number, arrived. Upon their arrival, no charge was preferred. They simply called up the Plataeans and asked them whether they had done the Spartans and allies any service in the war then raging. That's the test. The place that helped save Greece from Persia. Like, come up here. Each one. Come up here. What's your name? And how have you helped Sparta during the war? During this war? Well, they haven't at all. They're allies of Athens. They got nothing to say. Finally, one of them came forward and said, Spartans, when we surrendered our city, we trusted in you and looked forward to a trial more agreeable to the forms of law than the present, to which we had no idea of being subjected. The judges also in whose hands we consented to place ourselves were you, and you only. But of course the Thebans are standing there, also judging them, who are their notorious enemies. With regard to the Thebans, listen to this closely. They have wronged us repeatedly, and their last aggression, which has been the means of bringing us to this present position, is within your own knowledge. It's all the Thebans' fault. In seizing our city in time of peace, and what is more, at a holy time in the month, they justly encountered our vengeance, in accordance with the universal law which sanctions resistance to an invader. The Thebans invaded us, and that's why we turned to Athens for help. And it cannot now be right that we should suffer on their account. By taking your own immediate interest and their animosity as the test of justice, you will prove yourselves to be servants of expediency rather than judges of right. Where have we just heard this? What is just versus what is expedient? Who was just talking about that? I mean, you might not remember somebody's name or anything, but what was the context? They were debating something, and they killing all the Mytileneans. He said, we don't care what's just or right. We need to think about what's expedient. And the guy from Plataea is saying the same thing. Look, Thebes attacked us, and we became allies with Athens to save our skins. And now we're going to be punished because we haven't helped you in this war. That's not fair. It's just good for you. You're only thinking about what benefits your interests. You're not thinking about what's right. This isn't right. He said, consider also that at present the Hellenes regard you, Spartans, as a model of worth and honor. And if you pass an unjust sentence upon us, take care that displeasure be not felt at an unworthy decision. You're going to make other people mad at you. Okay, it goes on. Such were the words of the Plataeans. The Thebans get up and argue as well and defend themselves. such were the words of the Thebans. The Spartan judges decided the question, which they had received, whether they had received any service from the Plataeans in the war was a fair one for them to put, as they had always invited them to be neutral. So they once again brought them in and asked each of them the same question, whether they had done the Spartans and allies any service. And upon their saying they had not, took them out and slew them all without exception. The number of Plataeans thus massacred was not less than 200, with 25 Athenians who had shared the siege. The women were taken as slaves. Wow. Last question. How does wartime affect the meaning of words, promises, oaths, and nobility? Emma.
Similar like the plague and how it influenced morality. Everything just goes out the window.
Yeah. What do we care about? Expediency, not justice. Right? So here's a little bit of Thucydides' description. Words had to change their ordinary meaning and to take that which was now given them. Reckless audacity came to be considered the courage of a loyal supporter. Prudent hesitation became specious cowardice. Moderation was held to be a cloak for unmanliness. Ability to see all sides of a question, incapacity to act on any. Frantic violence became the attribute of manliness. He goes on for an entire page of how what was considered once upon a time moderation and thoughtfulness is just cowardice. And audacity and recklessness is courage. We call it by what we want to call it to make it sound good or bad. And then, as Emma pointed out, he closes with this. Human nature, always rebelling against the law and now its master, gladly showed itself ungoverned in passion, above respect for justice, and the enemy of all superiority. Above the law, ungoverned in passion, that's the situation. War is never good. And this book gives us just like a war under a microscope, you know, with the motives and the feelings and the actions, and it's just brutal. All right. I want you to read the sections that I've pointed out. It's books 4 and 5, but we're not reading all of them. Read only the sections that I told you to read in the reading guide. And I don't think it's not, certainly not anymore, and maybe not as much. Again, we're going to meet another just really brutal, famous section in Thucydides for next week. And write the encomium or invective. You're free to pick someone or someplace that you hate, and you want to make them look as bad as you possibly can, just by doing the opposite. Instead of saying everything in their background is good, say it's all bad. That they're blessed with all these good things. So say they have every bad character trait you can possibly think of. Any questions, comments, problems? Does Thucydides, is it making sense so far? Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in the number of place names and people names and everything, but that's why we're here together. I want to hit the highlights, and that's why I want you to answer the questions, because I tried to pick the things that I thought were most important. All right, awesome. Otherwise, if no questions, you can go, and I will see you next week. Everybody stay well and have a good week.